What's going on, everybody? This is Mike from the last Corvette. So I've made a bunch of videos about C6 Corvettes, especially on this channel. I own one, and they're getting old. I mean, even if you have low mileage, one owner, two owner, three owner with full service records, the time is slowly catching up to these vehicles, and there's also certain things you got to do. I always say that mileage is not a sign of either a bad vehicle or a good vehicle. If you have a low mileage vehicle, chances are in the long run, you're going to be replacing more components than, let's say, a vehicle with slightly higher mileage. So the more it's driven, hopefully it's maintained on top of that, you're going to get an overall better vehicle. Of course, you can get a vehicle, even a newer vehicle, that is driven into the ground, and they might have low miles, but it will need a lot of components. So going back to what I stated earlier, so 2005 was the first model year for the C6 Gen Corvette. That's 18 going on 19 years. The last one, 2013, so that's the last C6 Gen Corvette to roll off the assembly line before it got replaced by the C7 in 14, is now what, 10 years old, going on 11 years old. So it's a older vehicle now, regardless of the mileage, regardless of how it was maintained, right? Obviously, if it was maintained properly, it's going to last a lot longer. But what's happening now to all these vehicles are the little things, meaning that switches, computers, sensors are starting to basically degrade and go bad. Now, one of my friends has a 2005, so the first year of the C6 Corvette convertible automatic. So that one has the 6-liter LS2, also has a 4-speed automatic, which was, the 1-year carryover from the C5 Gen Corvette. Now, in '06 on all the way through the generation of the C6 on the automatic side, with few little upgrades, like I said, throughout the transmission run, they ended up putting a 6-speed automatic transmission with paddle shift option. And the main difference, obviously, is more gears, 2 more gears, slightly better transmission, not for drag racing. People love the 4-speed for putting down power, especially built ones. But the main thing is, obviously, they upgraded the transmission. They moved the old school GM shift knob from the top to the front of the shifter. But one of the things that GM always had issues with is the dual interlock, where you got to press on the brake, then you have to push on a lever to disengage the vehicle out of park. I understand the whole concept, but we've seen a lot of issues with solenoids, micro switches, and actually parking pause from the solenoid not disengaging and leaving people stuck in park, or not being able to put it back into park. And there is a fix for that. A couple of different ways you can actually fix the solenoid or the micro switch, or you can just cut the paw altogether, which works. But the problem is that anybody can just jump in the car without the vehicle running and throw it into reverse, neutral, drive, or whatever, and the vehicle possibly could roll. So anyway, moving forward, my friend has a 2005 convertible C6, and he's been having problems with the whole parking issue, and I've been giving him tips and tricks type thing, and I told him that eventually we might have to work on it. So this past season now, I'll say that, he hasn't really had any issues with it, at least no issues that he reported, but he's always been having intermittent issues with his convertible top. Mind you, it's a power top. Any convertible, newer convertible, we'll say, or convertible with sensors and switches that check to make sure that the top is down and the top is up, will have issues, especially over time. And we're approaching on that timeline where, well, the switches are starting to break down. They're starting to get basically sticky. And of course, the easiest way is if you have some electrical spray or contact spray, you can spray down the switches, work them, and make sure that they're working. You can also go a step further and connect the voltmeter and to make sure that the switch indeed is working. So open circuit, closed circuit. So he reached out to me about a C6 Corvette, and he said that he actually ended up leaving the top down on his convertible the entire summer. So I don't know if it was 6 months, 4 months, whatever it is, right? That's something you don't want to do on convertibles in general, because it's nothing to do with the convertible top, but you're not really saving anything, or you're not going to extend the life of your convertible motor, your hydraulic systems, or your mechanism, or your switches, because now you're exposing your switches for, whatever, water, condensation, dirt, right? But it's just the convertible top itself will crease. And that's something that you don't want to do, because over time you might have a clean car like he does, but the convertible will have all of the crease lines where it sits when it's folded up in the storage compartment, which is in the trunk in most vehicles, including the C6. So he reached out to me and said that he's having issues with bringing the top all the way up and then bringing the top all the way down. Now, one of the things on C6 Corvettes specific is you have a couple of sensors or switches that track the position of your top. And there's also added safety on top of that. We'll get into that. So you have a switch in your A-pillar that confirms that your top is actually latched into your windshield, basically, and your A-pillar. You have a single point of lock or latch. Like on a target top, you don't have any switches. You have 3 points of contact. You have 3 latches, 2 in the front, basically under the sun visors, and then a third latch, center of the B-pillar. No sensors. And I've heard some stories on forums of people basically throwing the top on, forgetting to latch either the back or the fronts or whatever, or all 3 of them, and the top comes off. And on most target tops, you don't really get sensors unless it's a newer vehicle. But on convertibles, you do, because you can really mess things up big time. So in most convertible cases, you either have to be in park to either lower or raise your top, or you have to be within a certain speed limit. Some manufacturers even make you go in park and the e-brake to make the top work. Most newer vehicles, obviously we've progressed engineering-wise and structural-wise and mechanical-wise greatly over the last 20 years. And you have tops, you have hard top convertibles and even soft top convertibles that can be going 20 plus miles an hour and fold down the top or raise the top. But everything is controlled. So on C6s, you do have a switch, like I said. So the top will basically come up when you're putting the top up about 95% of the way, and then you have to pull it in. There's a center latch right basically just above the rear view mirror, and you latch that in place. That's number one. But you do have a sensor that tells the vehicle that, hey, the top is engaged, and that's one of the faults that he was getting on his DIC, which is the Digital Information Center, that the top wasn't engaged, so the top wasn't down. You also have another switch in the trunk area, so there's a little flap on these convertibles if you open the trunk, and you can create more storage if the convertible top is actually up. But what it does is, if you unlatch it, there's a switch there as well. There's a micro switch there as well, which will prevent the top from going back down. Because what if you have something there, the top goes down, you break everything, right? Or you could damage your mechanism or the top itself. So you want to check both of those switches, not only to make sure that your basically closeout flap or partition is locked and the switch is engaged, but you also want to spray some contact cleaner, electrical contact cleaner on both switches. And then when you spray them, take a screwdriver or something like that, or a pin for the front A-pillar one, and just working in and out. Same thing with the back one. Of course, a step forward is to actually take a voltmeter and check to make sure that the switch indeed is open state and closed state, to make sure that the switch is not bad. I think in his case, he has one little thing going on. He told me that he left the top down for the summer, which, like I said, you don't want to do that, which exposes the switch, especially the A-pillar switch, to the elements. So I told him to clean that first. Number two, what you want to do is you want to cycle your windows, and that's something that is actually very common on most vehicles that have down cycle windows, or I should say down cycle window sequence when you open the doors, like the C6s do, regardless if they're convertibles or target tops or Z06s, ZR1s. So as soon as you grab a hold of your button on the door to open the door, the window will cycle down basically into like event mode to clear either your target top and the A-pillar or your convertible top and the A-pillar, okay, and the door opens. Now what happens, and a lot of people don't really know this, it's not just killing the battery or for say, disconnecting the battery. If you disconnect the battery and kill the power, you have to go through the reteach process, which I made a video on. It's very simple to do, as long as you have good working sensors on your windows. But it's also if you have the top down and there was a fault in between, it's not going to throw a DIC unless you actually have a good scanner to figure out what's going on with the top. So it's not going to be like a check engine light situation. Your DIC will display, hey, your front switch is not working or your back switch is not working, right? When you actually get to that point. So that's why I told him to clean those two. But to remedy most of the convertible problems on C6 Corvettes, you physically need to get in the vehicle, regardless of where the top is, okay? Halfway up in the trunk or 95% closed, basically. You want to start the vehicle, both doors closed. You can do both windows at a time, or you can do one window at a time, and it doesn't matter. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll the window down, let's say the driver's side first, and you're going to hold it. So you're actually going to press on the button to roll the window down. You're going to hold it for, let's say, 5 seconds, 5+ seconds. Then you're going to take that same switch and roll the window all the way up and hold it again. And every time you do that, you're going to hear a click, like in the door. And then you're going to roll it back down. I usually do it twice. Roll it back down and hold it again, hear a click. Roll it back up, hear a click. And then you're going to do the same thing on the passenger side as well. Okay, so you're going to roll it down, wait. You're going to roll it up, wait. Roll it down, wait. Roll it up. Most of the time, if you do it right, you will accomplish it just in the first try. You don't need to do like a double cycle, but it helps. And the easiest way to tell that your window cycle down is working, especially on a target top of convertible, is when you open the door, you'll see your window cycle. And when you close your door, you'll see your window cycle up. So down when it's open and then up when it's closed. And most of the time that will fix your convertible top issues. Now, the main thing about C6 convertibles and target tops, anytime you disconnect power, or believe it or not, when your battery's starting to get low, every time you open the door, try to open the door, the window will actually cycle down further and further and further and further, and that's to prevent damage. It's not going back up. And once that happens, you do need to go through this window cycle process. And of course, sometimes, especially on convertibles, if both of your switches are good and your mechanical is good and your motor and everything else is good, what you need to do is cycle the windows, go through that procedure that I just explained, and about 75 to 80% of the time it will fix your top issues, where the top will now retract all the way into the trunk and then go all the way in, and you'll be able to latch it and hold it in place. His main issue is, at least what he was telling me over text message, is that when the top goes up, the windows will start coming up, and then the windows start basically cycling down and the top retracts. And that tells me that the window cycle is not set properly. Something is not telling you that, hey, you're clear, you can actually latch yourself. So I bet it's that. And if it's not, then it's a switch issue or a mechanical issue. But I'm most of the time kind of leaning towards the window cycle. And of course, if you have a convertible of any make, model, year, whatever, if you're going to store it, if you're going to use it or not use it, regardless, leave the top up, engage, fully stretch over the frame. That's the worst thing you can do, is leave the top down, because over time it's going to degrade, number one. Number two, it's going to start to basically look kind of, we'll say, used and abused because of those fold lines, those crease lines. And then eventually you're going to have to replace the top, which is pretty costly. Trust me, I did one on the Mustang before, Mustang GT convertible. And even though I did it myself and I went with aftermarket parts and aftermarket, window and all that stuff, it was still, I don't know, like $1,000 versus $1,000 for a OEM setup or more, whatever it was. So that's it in a nutshell. Power cycle, reteach process, or learn cycle. on these C6s is very important. You definitely don't want to damage your top, and it will prevent the top or your windows from shutting if it's not done. Talk to you guys later.